Why do you keep looking at my butt, human? The wrench slipped from Jay's hand. K. Ryan, fox ears perked, tail swinging like it had a mind of its own, grinned up at him. Relax, she teased. I didn't say I'm minded. Subscribe for more heartwarming human and alien stories filled with laughter, love, and a little chaos. Epsilon Port 9 never slept. Engines roared, coolant hissed, and somewhere in the maze of steel and steam, John Reed wiped a streak of grease from his cheek and wondered again how he'd ended up paired with the most distracting coworker in the galaxy. K. Ryan, Vulpine engineer, troublemaker, and resident spark plug of the repair bay, was currently elbowed deep in a thruster manifold, humming an offbeat tune and flicking her tail dangerously close to a live plasma line. He tried to focus on work, really, but Kay had a way of making that impossible. Every shift with her was a contest between fixing ships and keeping a straight face. 1 minute, she challenged him to see who could recalibrate faster. The next, she'd accidentally bump his shoulder just to watch him scowl. And yet, when she laughed, when that melodic sound echoed through the bay's metal walls, it did something strange to him, something he couldn't quite explain. Maybe it was the spark in her eyes. Maybe it was the tail. Either way, John was doomed. And deep down, he already knew it. The heat from the plasma torch shimmered across the hangar, casting gold light on the patched hull of the freighter Mara's wing. John crouched beneath it, a ratchet in one hand, half listening to the hum of engines cycling nearby. Around him, the usual chorus of Epsilon Port 9 filled the air. Grinding servos, clangs of metal, and K. Ryan's voice, singing loudly and off-key. And the captain said, "Tighten the bolts, or lose your pay." She sang, tail swaying behind her in rhythm. John smirked, tightening a clamp. "You do realize that's not how the song goes, right?" Kay peeked out from under the opposite side of the ship, smudged cheek glinting under the lights. "I improve things. Reed, it's a gift." "You mean you make noise?" "I make art," she countered, scooting closer until her ears poked out from beneath the hole like orange triangles. "Besides, your human music is boring. Every song's about heartbreak or trucks." He gave her a deadpan look. "We don't even have trucks in orbit." "Exactly my point." She grinned, flashing a fong. That grin always did it. Disarmed him, unsettled him. She looked like trouble personified, but the good kind. The kind that made the day shorter and the air a little lighter. He tried to get back to work, but Kay kept talking about the time she rewired an entire cargo skimmer, just to make the headlights flicker to the beat of her favorite song, or how Vulpine mechanics used tail flicks as shorthand when yelling across noisy hangars. John only half listened until she said, "And when it sways like this," she demonstrated with a slow, deliberate flick, "it means I'm being patient with someone who's clearly not as fast as me." "Funny," he said, voice flat. "I thought that meant you were about to knock over the coolant hose." Her ears twitched. Then she turned just in time to see the hose slipping off its hook. A second later, a jet of pale mist sprayed out. Kay squeaked, darting back, tail puffing like a feather duster. John caught the hose mid-swing, twisted the valve shut, and looked up at her through the fog. She blinked, drenched, but laughing. "You saw that coming, didn't you?" "Experience," he said simply, tossing her a rag. She caught it, still grinning. "You're lucky I'm cute when I almost blow things up." He chuckled, shaking his head. "You're lucky I have a sense of humor." They worked in companionable silence for a while after that. Well, as silent as Kay ever got. She hummed softly, tail flicking as she crawled through the narrow vent that led to the ship's fuel stabilizers. John passed her tools as she asked for them, though half the time she was already using them before he realized. Then came her voice from inside the hull. "You know, for a human, you're not bad company. Don't talk too much. Don't complain when I sing. That's rare." John leaned against the ship's frame. "And for a Vulpine, you don't bite yet." A pause, then a muffled laugh. "Don't tempt me, Reed." He couldn't see her face, but he could hear her smile. It was strange how easily she'd slipped into his world. He'd been at Epsilon Port 9 for 6 years. Long enough to stop learning names of new hires. Long enough to grow tired of the same stars outside the viewport. But Kay Ryan was different. She made the air crackle. She made even the dulcet shift feel alive. Later, when the ship's diagnostics pinged green and their shift wound down, Kay popped her head out of the vent, hair wild, face stir with oil. "See, perfect job," she said proudly. John checked the readings. "You missed a bolt." Her ears shot up, where he pointed toward a bracket near the stabilizer. Kay squinted, muttering something about human eyes, cheating, and crawled back in. When she emerged again, she was scowling. "You planted that bolt, didn't you?" He gave her a slow smile. "Guess you'll never know." Her tail flicked once, sharp, playful. "Oh, I'll get you back for that." And she did. Over the next few days, John found his wrench magnet reversed, his coffee cup mysteriously filled with jelly foam, and one of his spare gloves missing, only to see Kay using it as a puppet during lunch. But she also started showing up earlier to help him prep parts and sometimes stayed late, claiming she liked the quiet after everyone leaves. When the hangar lights dimmed and the noise faded, it was just them, the human mechanic and the foxwoman engineer, sitting on the wing of a half-repaired shuttle, laughing softly at nothing in particular. John didn't realize it then, but somewhere between the teasing and the laughter, she'd stopped being the new Vulpine girl. She'd become the reason he looked forward to work. Morning cycles at Epsilon Port 9 always started the same. Too early, too loud, and too bright. The cargo tugs rumbled past the hangar doors, while the maintenance crew filed in, half asleep, clutching coffee bulbs like lifelines. John was already there, leaning against a diagnostics terminal, with his cup steaming in hand. Kay arrived 5 minutes late, ears tilted forward, tails swishing lazily behind her. "You're early," she said, stretching. "You're late," he countered fashionably. He smirked. "You're covered in yesterday's fashion." She glanced down, realizing a smear of engine grease streaked across her sleeve. "That's not grease, that's industrial war paint." John chuckled and handed her a rag. "Then, consider me your enemy." She took it, with mock offense, brushing past him on her way to the open hull of the Arden Star. Her tail flicked against his leg. "Maybe by accident, maybe not. Watch it," he warned lightly. "Why?" "Afraid it'll catch feelings." He shook his head. "You really don't stop talking, do you?" Kay grinned over her shoulder. "Only when someone interests listening." That was how their mornings went now. Banter, traded like oxygen. Laughter, echoing between the clank of tools and hiss of coolant lines. Other workers had started taking notice, too. Someone painted Love Bay No. 3 in red marker on the storage locker door one night. Kay found it first. She just pointed at the graffiti and smirked. "Our reputation precedes us, Reed." He groaned. "You're impossible. I prefer irresistible." Their partnership worked frighteningly well, despite the chaos. Kay's nimble hands darted through tight spaces, fixing wiring clusters no one else could reach. John's steady expertise kept her improvisations from turning the ship into a fireball. Together, they hit every deadline with time to spare. But under all that joking, something else simmered. Something unspoken, but electric. During one maintenance job, they were recalibrating the stabilizer rings on a freighter. Kay was on the scaffolding above, lying flat with the scanner, tail dangling over the edge. John worked below, pretending not to notice the brush of fur against his shoulder every time she shifted. "Hey Reed," she called down. "You ever get bored of this job?" He tightened a bolt. "Every day." "So, why stay?" He hesitated, the wrench still in hand. "Because some things are worth fixing, even if they keep breaking." She leaned over the edge, ears tilting curiously. "You mean people?" He looked up at her. "Ships, but sure, people, too." Faye's expression softened, if only for a moment. "You've got a weird heart. Human," he grinned faintly. "You're just figuring that out." Her tail swished slow, amused. "No, I think I figured that out the day you saved me from that cooling hose." John rolled his eyes. "I didn't save you." "You absolutely did. Heroic, even." "Right," he said dryly, "because stopping you from freezing counts as heroism now. On my planet, it does. He met her gaze, then shook his head, returning to the stabilizer bolts. Your planet's weird, maybe. But it makes great fox women, she said with a wink. He couldn't argue with that. Later that week, they were assigned to inspect the underbelly of a cargo hauler. Tight quarters, low light, and far too much proximity. Kay shimmied ahead through the narrow access tunnel, while John followed, tools in hand. Her tail brushed his chest every few seconds. Could you move that thing? He muttered. Which thing? She said, innocently. He sighed. You know which thing. Her laughter echoed down the tunnel. Oh, I'm sure I don't. By the time they crawled out, John was covered in dust and a faint flush of frustration. Kay was all smiles. You're blushing, Reed. It's hot in there, right? Must have been the atmosphere. They ended up taking lunch together, in the shade of a half-dismantled shuttle wing, sitting side by side on a crate. Kay ate something spicy and bright orange from a foil packet. John nursed his coffee bulb like it was sacred. Humans and your bitter drinks. Suppressing a grin, you said it yourself. I'm quoting. Kale's eyes narrowed, lips twitching. You better hope that wrenching your hand is faster than my tail. She lunged. He dodged, laughing as her tail whipped through the air like a striking cat. She missed barely and ended up bumping into him instead. For a second, their balance faltered. His arm instinctively caught her waist, steadying her. She froze, staring up at him. The hum of the port faded into background static. Thanks, she said finally, voice a notch lower than usual. He released her gently. Careful. You almost knocked over the mainline power feed. She stepped back, brushing imaginary dust from her suit. You'd miss me if I got vaporized. He grinned. Yeah. I'd have to fix your half-finished work. Her laugh broke the moment's tension, like glass shattering. She smirked, tail flicking. Bo, you wish you could work like me. That night, when their shift ended, Kay didn't rush off like usual. Instead, she followed him to the break room, tails swishing behind her. Reed, she said, leaning on the counter. I've decided something. That usually means trouble. I'm teaching you something useful. He arched a brow. Last time you said that, I almost lost an eyebrow. This time, it's safe. Promise. Her smile softened. You humans never notice body language. You know how much you can tell from a tail. Enlighten me. She stood straighter, tail swaying gently. Okay, tail down means I'm calm. Flicking means I'm irritated. Big puff. That's panic or surprise. And this, she let the tail curve in a slow, lazy circle, means I'm content. John leaned against the counter, arms folded. And when it points right at me, Kale's ears perked. And for a moment, she seemed caught off guard. Then, that sly grin returned. Depends if I like you that day. He chuckled. You keep saying that, like it's not obvious. Her eyes sparkled. Oh, what's obvious? That you like everyone watching you work, he said smoothly, gesturing toward the windowed hangar. She laughed, smacking his shoulder with her tail. Cowards. Answer, accurate one, he said, smirking. But later, when she left for her quarters, he caught himself watching her tail as she walked away, half wondering what that particular sway meant. The next day brought a new problem. A short circuit in one of the power arrays overloaded a panel, showering sparks across the floor. Kay cursed in Volfic, yanking the main cable before the system fried. John ran over, grabbing a fire suppressor. You okay? I'm fine, she said, brushing soot from her sleeve. Mostly embarrassed. That was my relay. He checked her over anyway. Habit, maybe. Her sleeve was scorched. One patch of first singed near her wrist. Hold still, Reed, it's nothing. He took her arm, gently, and sprayed a coolant mist over the burn. There, you'll live. Kay blinked at him, tail stilled. You really are impossible, because I care if my coworker doesn't catch fire. Because you make it sound like it's not sweet. She looked away. Then the edge of her smirk softening into something quieter. The hum of the hangar seemed distant again, and for a long moment, neither of them said anything. When she finally spoke, it was almost a whisper. You know, I wasn't sure about humans when I got here. You all seem rigid, but you bend a little. He tilted his head. Is that a compliment? Her grin returned. Don't let it go to your head, sweetheart. He groaned. You're never letting that nickname go, are you? Not until you earn a better one, he laughed. But when she turned away, he found himself still smiling. Somewhere between the pranks, the arguments, and the quiet moments over half-eaten lunches, Kay had become more than just a partner on shift. She was the spark in every dull hour, the chaos that made his structured life feel alive again. And maybe, just maybe, she was starting to feel the same way. The night shift was quieter than usual. Most of the crew had clocked out. The hangar lights dimmed to half-bright, and only the hum of the ventilation fans filled the air. John liked nights like this. No shouting, no traffic drones zipping overhead, just the work and the low comfort of his own breathing. Kay, of course, couldn't stand silence, so she began from the top of a maintenance ladder. If you weren't fixing other people's ships, what would you be doing? John tightened a valve below her, replying without looking up. Sleeping. Eating something that doesn't involve coolant leaks. She laughed softly, tail swaying as she crouched to check a conduit. You really are the most thrilling human alive. I aim for consistency. Her tail flicked just above his shoulder. Consistency is boring. You ever do something just because it felt right? He looked up. Then, she was backlit by the docking lights, hair and fur glowing faintly copper. Once or twice, he said. Usually regret it. She smiled faintly, climbing down to stand beside him. Maybe you're picking the right things. Maybe you're too confident in chaos. Kay shrugged. Chaos keeps life interesting. They worked side by side for a while. The quiet, filled with easy rhythm, the clink of tools, the low buzz of machinery, the occasional brush of her shoulder against his. Somewhere between adjusting pressure valves and calibrating sensors, Kay began humming under her breath. It wasn't her usual off-key noise. It was soft, almost melodic. That new? He asked. She blinked, startled. The song? It's nice. Oh, her ears flicked slightly. It's an old lullaby. My mother used to sing it. He didn't say anything right away, just listened as she continued. It wasn't until she trailed off that she added quietly, I don't remember her face much, just the sound. John looked over. You left home young. Kay nodded, keeping her eyes on the open panel. Too many rules, too much tradition. I wanted to build ships, not obey people. Seems like you made the right call. She gave a soft laugh. Maybe still gets lonely sometimes. He hesitated, then said, yeah, I get that. Their eyes met for just a second before she broke it with a grin. Phew, Mr. Steady Hands. Read lonely, impossible. He smirked. Even steady hands need someone to hand them a wrench once in a while. Her tail flicked once. Slow, deliberate. I could be convinced to do that. Could you now? I'm hum. She leaned on the railing beside him, her voice softening. Long as you don't start singing about heartbreak or trucks. He chuckled. Deal. They stood like that for a while, watching the last cargo shuttle drift out into the black, its thrusters painting gold trails across the viewport glass. Her tail brushed slightly against his leg, lingering longer than before. Neither moved away. It wasn't a confession, but it was close enough. When they finally shut down the bay lights, Kay yawned, stretching her arms. You know, she said, half turning toward him, you're not so bad for a human, and you're not so bad for a walking fire hazard. She laughed, bumping his shoulder, as they walked toward the locker room. See, compliments. You're learning from the best, he said, holding the door open. Kay's tail flicked as she passed. Flattery will get you everywhere, Reed, he smiled, shaking his head. Maybe chaos wasn't so bad after all. Morning came with the heavy scent of coolant and coffee. Two things John couldn't live without, and one thing Kay definitely couldn't be trusted around. She'd been tinkering with the fluid dispenser again, trying to optimize caffeine flow. The result, a half-flooded counter and a victorious foxwoman sipping from a dented mug. You're lucky it didn't explode, John muttered, setting down his toolkit beside the Comet's Grace. A cargo hauler scheduled for pre-flight inspection. Didn't explode. Means I'm improving, Kay said cheerfully, hopping up on the wing strut. Besides, what's life without a little excitement? He gave her a look, coming from the woman who nearly set her tail on fire last week. Minor incident, barely singed, she said, flicking that same tail like it had a personality of its own. John tried not to stare. Tried and failed. The Comet's Grace loomed overhead, But all he could focus on was Kale's tail, swaying lazily as she leaned over the open thruster panel. Her fur shimmered faintly under the lights, soft copper and cream, and when she moved, it caught the glow in a way that looked almost deliberate. He told himself he was just checking the wiring behind her. He told himself a lot of things. She crouched lower, humming to herself, and the tail flicked again. Rhythmic, hypnotic, impossible not to notice. "Read," she called over her shoulder. "Pass me the plasma driver." He handed it over, automatically. "Thanks, you're awfully quiet." "That's suspicious." "Just thinking," he said. "Dangerous habit for humans." She wiggled deeper into the panel, tail swaying right at his line of sight. He tried focusing on the diagnostics readout. He tried focusing on anything else. He failed again. And that's when her voice came, sharp, amused, and dangerously casual. "Why do you keep looking at my butt, human?" The wrench slipped from his hand, clattering to the floor with an echo that turned every nearby head. Kay turned around, grinning like she just caught a thief. Her golden eyes danced with pure mischief. John froze, throat suddenly dry. I wasn't." "Oh." She leaned forward on her elbows, smirk widening. "Because from this angle, it really looked like you were." "If I was," he coughed, trying to recover some shred of composure. "Looking at your tail." Her ears perked, pretending surprise. "My tail?" "Yes," he said quickly. "It moves a lot. Hard not to notice." Kay tilted her head, expression for innocent. "Me, so, the tail caught your attention." "That's what I said." She stepped closer, her grin sly, her voice dipping low enough for only him to hear. "Relax, read. I didn't say I wouldn't like it." He blinked. "Wait, what?" Too late. Kay was already laughing, tail flicking triumphantly behind her. The other mechanics nearby pretend. Smell of oil and ionized air. Yet every glance carried a charge. Every word seemed to hover between joke and confession. Kay, of course, acted like nothing had changed. If anything, she seemed to enjoy watching him stumble through her new level of mischief. One morning, John found a sticky note on his locker, in Kay's unmistakably messy handwriting. It read, "Stop staring at tails. Start buying lunch." Kay, he chuckled, tucking it into his pocket. That afternoon, he caught her elbow deep in a power core, humming off key again. "So," he said, leaning on the doorframe, "you're extorting me for food now." Kay glanced up, goggles resting on her forehead. "I call it incentive, right? Because my attention span needs motivation." She smiled slightly. "You keep looking at me, so it's working." He sighed. "Fine. Dinner after shift." "Don't say I didn't warn you." Her ears perked, tail flicking upward. Was that an invitation, Reed? It was a tactical surrender. "Same thing," she purred, sliding past them with a grin. "I like it when humans surrender." Their dinner turned out to be 2 rationed burgers at the port's rooftop canteen, overlooking the glowing sprawl of docking lights below. Cargo ships drifted in the void beyond the glass barrier, their trails gleaming like fireflies. Kay was halfway through her drink when she said, "You know, you're terrible at pretending not to be nice." "I'm not pretending," John said, sipping his coffee. "That's worse," she teased. "You actually are nice," he smirked. "You say that like it's a flaw for me." "Maybe it is. I'm used to humans who either stare too long or talk too little." He raised an eyebrow. "And which am I?" Kay leaned forward slightly, eyes catching the city light. "Both somehow," he chuckled, shaking his head. "You're impossible." She took another sip, pretending not to smile. "You keep saying that, like it's new information." A comfortable silence settled over them. Then, no clangs, no sparks, no crews shouting over just a quiet hum of the city beyond the glass. Kale's tail brushed his leg once, light as static. She didn't move it. John hesitated, then said, "You ever think about leaving this place?" She tilted her head. "Leaving Epsilon?" "Yeah." "Get off the station. Go planetside. Maybe start fresh." Kay thought for a long moment. "I used to. When I first got here, I thought I'd save up, find some quiet world to tinker in. But now," she trailed off, smiling faintly. "Now, I kind of like it here." He studied her face, the way her golden eyes softened when she wasn't joking. The faint flick of her ear when she was thinking. Yeah, he said quietly. Me too. Their eyes met. The air between them felt heavier than the thin, pressurized breeze could explain. Kay leaned back, breaking it with a grin. Careful, Reed. You're starting to sound sentimental. He smiled. Must be contagious. Probably, she said. You should get that checked. After dinner, they walked the corridor, leading back to their quarters. The station night cycle had begun. Lights dimmed to blue, stars visible through the long windowed passage. Kay's tail brushed the glass as she walked, glowing faintly in the reflection. You know, she said, casually, for a guy who was supposedly looking at my tail, you're actually not bad company. He laughed. That's a glowing review. Don't let it go to your head, she said, smirking. You still owe me another dinner. Already planning your next blackmail attempt. Blackmails. Such an ugly word. I prefer flirtation with consequences. He shot her a sidelong glance. You ever stop flirting? Her ears tilted toward him, tail curling just slightly. Would you want me to? He didn't answer. He didn't have to. They reached the lift, standing side by side in the humming quiet. Cale's reflection shimmered beside his in the glass door, smudged with grease, hair messy, eyes bright. When the doors slid open, she looked up at him and said softly, Thanks for dinner, Reed. Anytime, he said. She hesitated, then added, and for not running away that day in the hangar. He frowned slightly. Why would I run? Kay smiled, stepping into the lift. Most humans don't handle jokes like that very well. John followed her in. Guess I'm not most humans. Her tail brushed his leg again, deliberate this time. Yeah, she murmured. Guess not. The lift doors closed. Later that night, lying in his bunk, John stared at the ceiling and realized the truth. He wasn't just drawn to her charm or her teasing. Kay had slipped past every wall he built in that lonely mechanical life, and he wasn't sure whether to be terrified or grateful. He rolled over, smiling faintly to himself. Terrified could wait. Grateful felt better. The next time they went out, Kay made him wait. John stood outside the canteen window, tapping his boot impatiently against the floor. He'd even changed his shirt, a rare act of self-care he hoped someone would notice. When the door finally slid open, someone did. Kay stepped through, and the world seemed to take a beat to catch up. Her usual grease-stained coveralls were gone, replaced by a sleek, dark blue outfit that shimmered faintly when she moved. Her hair was brushed smooth, ears perked proudly, and her tail glowed in the soft amber of the corridor lights. No goggles, no oil smudges, just Kay, radiant and self-assured in a way that made John forget every word he'd planned to say. Well, she asked, hands on hips, ears twitching. Are you going to keep staring, or compliment me before oxygen runs out? He blinked. Yeah, you look wow. She smiled, satisfied. Acceptable answer. They went to the same rooftop canteen, but this time Kay led him past the tables to a small balcony overlooking the port's glass expanse. Stars filled the view, countless streaks of white and violet over the black horizon. The two of them leaned on the railing close enough for her shoulder to brush his. I didn't think you'd actually show up, she teased. Why is that? Because humans are predictable. You lot like routines. Work, eat, sleep. No surprises. John smiled faintly. You're confusing predictable with reliable. Kay chuckled. Then, maybe I needed a little reliability tonight. They talked for hours, about nothing and everything. Terrible cafeteria food, the best star routes for cargo haulers, why humans never learn to nap properly. Kay told stories from her apprentice days, half boast, half confession. John shared one about almost blowing up a repair bay when he first started. Her laughter came easily, warm, and unguarded. When she smiled at him between sips of her drink, her eyes softened. Not the teasing glint he knew, but something quiet and sincere. At some point, she reached out and rested her tail across his lap lightly, like a bridge instead of a boundary. He froze. RKHM, she murmured, sipping her drink without looking at him. Your tail owed that old thing. It does what it wants. He gave her a look. She laughed. Fine. Maybe I let it. You humans are so twitchy. Twitchy. She nodded, amused. You act like you've never been touched by something soft before. He smiled, despite himself. Maybe not by something that talks back. That earned him a grin. The conversation faded into comfortable silence. The kind that didn't need filling. The city lights painted her fur in gold and violet hues. She turned toward him then, tail curling slightly tighter across his legs. So, she said quietly, still just looking at my tail. Read. He met her eyes, heartbeat quickening. I don't think that's what I've been looking at for a while now. Her ears twitched once. Then, she leaned forward before he could second-guess himself. The kiss was gentle, hesitant, almost clumsy, but real warm. Kale's hands found the front of his jacket, pulling him a little closer as her tail flicked behind her, curling up like a satisfied ribbon. When she finally drew back, her voice was soft and teasing all at once. Took you long enough, human. He chuckled, resting his forehead against hers. I was waiting for the right moment. She smirked. Guess you found it. The view beyond the glass shimmered with passing ships, their thrusters reflecting across the balcony. Somewhere below, the hum of Epsilon Port 9 continued, oblivious to the small universe that had just shifted inside. Two hearts, leaning too close to fall back again. Kay gave his collar a playful tug. Next time, she whispered, I'm choosing where we go, and it'll definitely involve dessert. Dangerous, he murmured. She grinned, voice low. So am I. Morning shift. Same hangar, same chaos, different everything. John had barely stepped through the bay doors before Kay was already waving a wrench at him from across the deck. Hey sweetheart, you're late. He stopped mid. We're not doing that nickname again. Her tail swayed smugly. Too late. It's canon now, he groaned, walking over with his coffee bulb in hand. You realize people can hear you, right? That's the point, she said, with a grin, hopping down from the scaffolding. Let them know I've domesticated the big scary human. Domesticated? He asked, amused. You've met me, right? She tilted her head. Yeah, and I've met your coffee addiction and your neatly labeled toolboxes. You're basically a house pet that talks back. He chuckled, setting his cup aside. You're asking for trouble. I live for trouble. The other texts tried to hide their smiles as they passed by, pretending not to listen while exchanging quiet bets about how long it would take before one of them kissed again. It didn't help that Kay made a game of finding excuses to brush up against him, handing over tools that were already in his grasp, leaning a bit too close when checking readouts. John had given up pretending to mind. Later, when the hangar quieted and the freighter diagnostic showed all green, Kay sat cross-legged on the hull beside him, chewing on a snack bar while he checked his datapad. You know, she said, I thought being a couple would ruin the fun. He raised an eye. Murmured. Yeah, thanks for not running away. He smiled softly. You'd have chased me anyway. Kale's laugh was quiet, almost tender. You're probably right. She sat up, eyes glinting. Come on, we've got another ship tomorrow. Maybe two, if you bribe me with dessert. I thought you worked for credits. She grinned, hopping down from the hull. I work for sugar and attention. Don't complicate it. He shook his head, chuckling as she sauntered toward the exit, tails swaying with deliberate confidence. He finished logging their work order, feeling that familiar warmth that only she brought into his cold, mechanical world. Somewhere along the line, Kay Ryan had turned the daily grind of Epsilon Port 9 into something almost beautiful. And if that wasn't a miracle, John didn't know what was. The following week passed in a comfortable blur of work laughter and half-whispered jokes that made the other texts roll their eyes. Everyone in the hangar knew by now. John and Kay were inseparable. She'd taken to calling him my human in front of people, half as a tease and half as a claim. He pretended to grumble about it, but she could tell he liked it. They worked late, one evening alone, again in the quiet bay. The air hummed with the low rhythm of coolant pumps, and the deck lights shimmered in gentle blue reflections off polished whole metal. Kay was perched on a crate, tightening a small assembly valve, while John ran diagnostics on his datapad. You ever think we make a good team? She asked suddenly. He looked up. You mean, aside from the property damage? Exactly, she said, flashing a grin. It's kind of nice though. Never thought I'd find someone who could keep up with me. Keep up. I'm the one, cleaning up your improvements. Semantics, she said, flicking her tail against his arm. He caught the tip gently, holding it between two fingers. She froze for half a second, ears twitching, eyes widening just a little. He smirked. Still. Sure, you've got the upper hand. Kale's tail twitched once in his grasp, before curling around his wrist. A silent answer. Maybe we're tied. They both laughed softly, the moment dissolving into easy warmth. When the last shuttle of the day lifted off through the docking tunnel, they stood together by the bay window, watching the thrusters fade into the black. Kay leaned into him, arms folded, tail brushing lazily against his leg. Hard to believe. I used to think humans were boring, she murmured. Most of us are, he said. You just got unlucky. She laughed quietly. No, I think I got curious. He glanced down at her, curious. Kay turned slightly, golden eyes glinting with mischief, about how far I could push a human before he stopped pretending he didn't like me. And what did you find out? She leaned closer until her nose almost brushed his. That he's a very patient man. John chuckled. You call that patience? I call it charm. He kissed her softly, this time without surprise, like it was something that simply belonged there. Now, her hands slid up to his collar, pulling him closer, her tail looping lazily around his waist like a ribbon. The hangar lights dimmed tonight's cycle, but neither of them moved to leave. When they finally pulled apart, Kay's voice was low, teasing as ever. You know, Reed, if we keep this up, people are going to start asking when the wedding is. P smirked. Let them ask. Maybe they'll start asking about Kits too. He blinked. Kits. She stepped back, tail flicking like punctuation. Vulpine kids. Small, curious, loud, and covered in fur. Don't worry. If we ever have any, I'll teach them to only slightly torment you. John rubbed the back of his neck, smiling helplessly. You plan far ahead. Kay shrugged, pretending to study the stars through the viewport. I like knowing what projects I'm working toward. He slipped an arm around her waist, drawing her close again. Then, I guess I'll have to learn how to build a crib instead of a coolant valve. Her laugh echoed through the quiet hangar, soft, genuine, and entirely hers. You'd probably over-engineer it. Guaranteed, he said, smiling into her hair. They stood like that for a long while, just two silhouettes against the endless dark, surrounded by the hum of machines and the slow drift of starlight. Kay finally sighed, her tail brushing his side. You know, Reed, I used to think I was running from home, and now it feels like I found one. He looked down at her, voice soft. Good, because I'm not letting you run anywhere. Her ears flicked playfully. Careful, human. I might actually hold you to that. Deal, he murmured. Outside, a freighter cut across the stars, its thrusters painting golden trails that glimmered through the hangar glass. Inside, Kay Ryan and John Reed stood together, two workers in a forgotten port, finding something extraordinary in the ordinary. And when Kay finally pulled back, smiling that mischievous smile, she whispered one last thing that made him laugh out loud. Just don't look at my butt while I'm holding the baby. If you enjoyed their story, hit subscribe and join us for the next tale among the stars.